little taken aback by some of the commentary on California's new highest in the nation minimum wage law for fast food workers, $20 an hour. Our next guest, Professor David Neumark, the headline of an op-ed he wrote in the Wall Street Journal, California's crazy fast food minimum wage takes effect. Crazy?
Uh-oh. Cray.
I know. It's crazy because it's too low.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Congresswoman, human Barbara Lee from California, you remember, I mean, she's done the math. She knows what it actually needs to be. So I'm hoping, I assume, $20 will just be a way station to get to where it really needs
40.
to be.
You're calling for a $50 an hour federal minimum wage. That's 7 times the current national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Can you explain how that would be economically sustainable for small businesses? You have 60 seconds.
First, let me say I owned and ran a small business for 11 years. I created hundreds of jobs,
Right.
benefits, retirement benefits, also health care benefits. I know what worker productivity means, and that means that you have to make sure that your employees are taken care of and have a living wage. In the Bay Area, I believe it was the United Way, came out with a report that very recently, $127,000 for a family of 4 is just barely enough to get by. Another survey very recently, $104,000 for a family of 1, barely enough to get by. Low income because of the affordability crisis. And so just do the math. Just do the math. Of course, we have national minimum wages that we need to raise to a living wage. You're talking about $20, $25, fine. But I have got to be focused on what California needs and what the affordability factor is when we calculate this wage.
Dinner bell. So it is exactly, the math is so simple. I don't understand, right? $104,000 per person for an individual to live in the Bay Area that Barbara Lee so ably represents. Simple, $50 an hour times 40 hours a week times 52 weeks in a year. That's $104,000.
Yeah.
Do the math, people. It couldn't be more straightforward. David Neumark, distinguished professor of economics at the University of California, Irvine, the Anteaters, and a visiting scholar at the Hoover Institution, joins us. Professor, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm impressed you know it was the Anteaters.
I know every Division I college nickname.
I know. What are the banana slugs?
It's one of
UC Santa Cruz.
It's one of my points of pride. So, you wrote this piece in the Wall Street Journal. What is confusing about that simple math that Barbara Lee did?
Many things. I think there's a fundamental disconnect that people have when they talk about minimum wages, and it's usually those talking about high minimum wages, right? We care, I think, as a society, and it's reflected in every other government program, essentially, about family income, right? You know, the U.S. and other richer countries, we impose some floor on what families are going to have. Whether it's food assistance or energy assistance or earned income tax credit or child tax credit or other ways we get, Section 8 housing. We provide a floor. In the U.S., we do it in a kind of haphazard way, but it's about family income. The minimum wage is not about family income. The minimum wage is about an individual's wage. So you often hear, a family can't get by with one minimum wage worker. Well, the bottom line is most families don't get by with one minimum wage worker because most minimum wages are not the sole breadwinner or the primary breadwinner of their families, right? Who are by far the most common minimum wage workers? They're teenagers.
Right.
Right. And they're teenagers. Why are they low wage? Because they're teenagers. They don't know anything. If I had worked at 16, I probably wouldn't have been worth more than the minimum wage anyway. And as you get older, you earn more, and probably same with most of your listeners. They had high school jobs. But those people are not in low-income families and certainly not in poor families. If you do the math, the right math, you find that to get a dollar to poor families through raising the minimum wage, you have to increase the wage bill by about $5. And the reason is because less than 20% of minimum wage workers are in poor families. And over a third of them are in families that have above average or above median income. So it's just a very blunt tool. So the first reason is a lot of minimum wage workers are not in poor families, not even in low-income families. And the second is a lot of poor families, even with working age adults, not retirement age adults, have zero workers. And the minimum wage does nothing for them. So I am perfectly sympathetic to the view that we need to make sure families have a minimum level of resources. We can obviously all argue about the best way to do that, but this is one of the I won't use the same language the Wall Street Journal put on my op-ed, but this is one of the silliest or least well-targeted ways to do it, because it's not directly addressing low family income. It's a law that doesn't say your family income shall not be low. It's a law that says your wage shall not be low. Very crude way to address the problem.
Well, what have Dan,
But I mean, what's the down? There's no downside. There are studies, Professor, that say this does not increase unemployment. It does not result in job loss. It does not result in price increase. Studies, top men have done studies. So there is no reason not to do this because there is no downside, you see.
Well, they're not just men, first of all, but it's a very small number of so-called top studies that show that. If you put together, as I did, a chart that essentially displays all the U.S. minimum wage studies in the last 20 years, very few fail to find negative effects. And in fact, the ones that get cited the most, the famous New Jersey, Pennsylvania minimum wage study, for example, is absolutely an outlier. It doesn't just find no reduction. It finds massive increases in employment, which I'm pretty sure nobody believes anymore. So the advocates, there is research they can cite. They have to cite it very selectively. Look, I mean, and that's true of many issues. I am one who 100% believes there's man-made climate change. Are there studies that say there isn't? Yes. Is it a lot of studies? No, it's very few of the total number of studies. So you got to be, it's one thing to wave a study and say, aha, look, here's the result I want to advocate for. It's another, and it's much harder and more tedious and takes a lot more time to go through all the research and kind of say, what does the overall evidence say? And you got to remember, this isn't a lab science. Like in economics and social sciences, you're not running something under controlled conditions. You shouldn't replicate the exact same estimate of, some physical constant every time. People are looking where minimum wages went up. They're looking where minimum wages didn't go up. They're trying to think about a way to figure out what was the actual effect of the minimum wage once we control for the business cycle and whatever else is going on. It's hard to do. You don't expect every study to give you the same answer, but by the same reasoning, you can't point to one study that's an exception and say, this proves it, and everybody else is wrong.
Well, have there been, since this took effect, have businesses been laying off employees or shutting down altogether? Is there any science and data on that?
Well, it took effect yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, but to prepare for it, though,
yes.
Well, we've seen some. I've seen online. I mean, I don't have like the date stamps on this, but it's been interesting in some of the fast food restaurants. Like, 2 days ago, the prices for burgers and fries versus 2 days. I don't know if it's causative or causal or correlative, but you see price increases at fast food joints on some menus that were screenshotted side by side. So. Maybe some fast food proprietors are trying to send a message and get by.
I don't know they're trying to send it. I don't think they're in the message sending business. I think
well,
they're
I mean,
the profits business. The
timing of it. So they knew when it was going to take effect, and they made the change as soon as it did. I mean, that there's a message sending piece to that too, I think. But anyway,
that's true. But it's hard to point to any one event. But the research shows that there is job loss among the least skilled. So we will expect some essentially substitution towards the least skilled labor. Fast food restaurants are going to find other ways to get things done. And the most obvious way we see that already, and it wasn't because this is the first time we've raised the minimum wage, obviously, is the kiosk checkout instead of ordering from a person. We'll also see somewhat higher prices. So all consumers, now that's not going to be a lot of pain. If your fast food prices go up by 4%, that's a pretty good estimate. It's not a lot of pain, but that's spread over a lot of people, right? So it's diffuse. The worker who keeps their job and earns more will be a lot happier. But the cost is borne somewhere, and people talk about the minimum wage like all that happens is some workers get higher wages, and that's it. Now, that's part of what happens, but it's not all that happens. It's kind of like the squeezing a balloon analogy. There's something moves somewhere else. A little less employment, higher prices, maybe we're going to wait longer on lines. There's a funny study, but it seems to be a good one, of the Seattle minimum wage. Restaurants let their bathrooms get a little dirtier, a little less labor. That's a labor-intensive job, right? You can't do that with a robot, or not very cheaply. There's a lot of adjustments they make, all of which impact some of us, and all the other ones are adverse. And as you started with, some businesses that are kind of on the margin will either close or perhaps more likely not open. Starting a new, you're open, you're already open. But if you're thinking about, am I going to start a new one here or not, you might say, it no longer looks like a profitable idea, so I won't.
David Neumark, distinguished professor of economics at the University of California, Irvine, and a visiting scholar at the Hoover Institution as well. His piece, and he didn't write the headline, I know, California's crazy fast food minimum wage takes effect. That's in the Wall Street Journal. Professor Neumark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Relief factor, pain relief that's natural, pain relief that works, and pain relief that attacks the source of the pain. That's the experience of tens of thousands of Americans who are taking Relief Factor right now. See their incredible video endorsements at relieffactor.com and then order your 3-week quick starter pack for just $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Find out if it can work for you.